Welcome back, it's me, Lou. For today's vlog, we're going to take a look at the darker side of action figure collecting, and that is experiencing burnout. Alright, so about 10 months ago, I posted this poll on my YouTube channel, and it was, do you ever go through action figure collecting burnout? So over the course of 10 months, I received 40 votes. It's not a lot, but for me, it's kind of a way to gauge roughly, what people's thoughts are on this subject. So I offered 4 choices. Choice number 1 was yes, sometimes I get tired of collecting the same line. The second choice was yes, I even quit or took some time off. The third option was no, keep those new figs coming. And then the last choice I offered was no, I even started collecting new lines. So this isn't really necessarily a scientific, survey whatsoever. For me, it was just trying to gauge what other people felt about the hobby and how they experience, burnout. Especially if you've been into the hobby for such a long time, you're not always going to experience the highs. It's always you're going to hit your peaks and your valleys, your highs and your lows. And I kind of wanted to gauge how people responded when they were faced with action figure collecting burnout. So we're going to talk about this a little today, and hopefully if you've experienced burnout before, or if you're going through it right now, this will help you through it. If you're new to collecting, this is kind of like more like a warning of what to expect if you dive into the hobby, really deep. All right, so let's get started. All right, so 10 months ago I posted, do you ever go through action figure collecting burnout? And right now we're going to take a look at the first answer. So this is out of 40 votes. It was yes, sometimes I get tired of collecting the same line. And that was a response given by 8% of the people who participated. So for me, this is something I can relate to. For some action figure lines, it seems like they go on and on forever and ever. I really enjoy it when an action figure toy line is finite. And when I say finite, maybe there's a new, for example, like a Spider-Man movie coming out. And then Hasbro offers a budget toy line where it's maybe only 6 figures total, maybe 2 waves. And for me, that's very doable. It's easy to bookend that collection. It's very defined. There's only going to be those 6 action figures. They might have vehicles that accompany it. And I love stuff like that. There's other toy lines, for example, like Marvel Legends, produced by Hasbro. And that's seemingly a line with no end. It seems like it's going to go on until the end of time. So for me, when I collect certain toy lines like that, it's, at least for me, easy to get burned out. I feel like I'm going through the same motions over and over again. Sometimes I think the incentive to keep me in collecting that line isn't always attractive. Sometimes, especially with Marvel Legends, they offer the Build-A-Figures. And it's kind of their way of getting you to buy all the figures in a wave, or at least 90% of the figures in the wave, just so you could build that one special action figure. And every now and then I kind of feel like, I'm being baited into something, or, sometimes it doesn't feel as, for lack of a better term, genuine on Hasbro's part. Every now and then sometimes stuff feels like an easy cash grab. But then again, this is just my opinion. Anytime they offer certain lines of action figures and it prolongs too long, maybe I develop a sense of resentment, almost feeling like, why are they doing this to me? But in all honesty, you're just doing this to yourself. No one ever puts a gun to your head and tells you need to buy these things. I think that's something you always have to keep in mind in this hobby, is that it's your decision to buy these toys and these action figures. There's no you're not being hypnotized through marketing or through advertising. It's your decision. The minute you pick up an action figure and bring it to the counter and pay for it, that's a decision you have to make. And I think sometimes it's easy for some of us to get blindsided by that and feel like that we're maybe obligated to continue on with a certain thing. For example, I love the Power Rangers Lightning collection put out by Hasbro. I've been collecting it since day one. I probably have about 90% of the entire collection minus, some of the convention exclusives. And today I was at the store, and with the recent price increase on like a lot of Hasbro products, Power Rangers Lightning Collection especially, there were two different price points. I think I was paying like $24 for the red Ninja Ranger, and then I think $26 for both the pink Ranger and the yellow one. And it's kind of odd because it was only like maybe 2 years ago that those figures were priced at maybe like $19 a piece. And now that there's been a significant price increase, but also, there's different tiers depending on which figure you're buying, it's kind of crazy. And those were the three figures I needed to complete that Ninja Ranger set. And I've been putting it off just because I can't stomach paying, upwards towards $27 just for one figure, when maybe a little over a year and a half ago I was just paying $19. But I told myself today, if I buy these three figures, it kind of bookends my Power Rangers collection. And when I say bookend, I mean, there's a start and there's a finish. When I started the Power Rangers Lightning Collection, I started the bookend with the White Ranger, which came out, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago when the Lightning Collection first started. And now I feel like I could finally finish off my collection and bookend it, with the Ninja Rangers. Because for me, when it comes to like Power Rangers, I was only into the show for so long, maybe the first 6 seasons. And anything post, those first 6 seasons is stuff, I might not necessarily be into or be vaguely familiar with. So it was nice today that I got to bookend that collection, and now I can just put aside the Power Rangers collection and say I'm done with it. But at the same time, it kind of came at a cost. With the recent price increases, it's like, it was hard for me to stomach paying $27 just for one figure. And, for me, that kind of falls within this category. Yes, sometimes I get tired of collecting the same line. But that can be said with other things too. I kind of feel that way with like the G.I. Joe Classified series. I kind of feel like that that action figure line was met with a lot of enthusiasm, when it first debuted. Collectors, especially me from that generation of the 80s, we were so excited to finally have official 6-inch Joes. And it seems like, the strategy to like releasing those figures and the distributions has been kind of, I don't want to say it's been horrible, because they do offer you the option of buying those figures online through Hasbro Pulse. But I kind of feel like their distribution on the Classified series isn't up to the same standard as like, the Star Wars stuff or the Power Rangers or, Marvel Legends, which really feels like Hasbro's like flagship when it comes to the 6-inch action figures. So for me, I'm kind of burned out on collecting the Hasbro stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. I can relate to like, I get tired of collecting the same thing over and over again, especially if there's no end in sight, or if the distribution of the figures just seems kind of wonky. It's nice if it feels like the company has a strategy, rather than feeling like I'm just being baited along. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the next response. And this was a very popular one that was 50% of the votes. It's yes, I even quit or took some time off. All right, this is something I can relate to also. All right, so when you collect action figures, I think it was a lot easier back in the day, like in the 90s especially, right before the big action figure boom, because I kind of felt like you were kind of limited to what you could buy just because there weren't as many options. But nowadays, it feels like, there's stuff coming at you, from the left and from the right. But like I said, no one's putting a gun to your head and forcing you to buy these things. But at the same time, as a consumer, I like to kind of pace myself. And sometimes I feel like, as much as I enjoy the product, that sometimes, it feels like I'm like hitting a tidal wave where I'm being like just swamped with so many options at once. It's kind of like when you go to like a restaurant, for example, like a Cheesecake Factory or a Denny's, and, they hand you the menu, and the menu's like, it's gigantic. There's so many pages and there's so many options. It's kind of overwhelming, and sometimes you can't make up your mind. For me, sometimes the best restaurant experiences are the ones where There's a very limited menu, and everything's, a home run. Whereas when you go to like, Denny's or something, it's like it takes forever, and if you're with a group of people, no one can make up their mind, and it's just kind of a mess. But at the same time, if you go to like a finer restaurant, you're going to pay a lot more money, but sometimes the options are a lot limited. So it's easy for you to focus on what you really want. And I kind of feel like with action figure collecting, sometimes there's just too much. And if you're a completionist, that can make you crazy. And I've seen instances where people will quit the hobby altogether because there's no breathing room, or they feel like they can't keep up, or there's that feeling that you're missing out on something and you can't have it. For example, if you've been collecting during the early 90s or mid 90s, you'll be familiar with Playmates and their Star Trek line. Well, Playmates had this great idea to do limited edition action figures that were numbered 1 through 1,701. And if you know Star Trek, 1701 is the designation to the Starship Enterprise. So I think there was 3 action figures that they had limited to only 1,701 copies, and I think they were individually numbered. There was, I think, a Tasha Yar, I want to say maybe a Data, and then a Captain Picard. And I remember those figures were so impossible to find, and that a lot of collectors that were completionists, if they couldn't obtain those figures, they kind of just wrapped it up and said, I'm done, I'm quitting the hobby, and they just end up selling their collections. So that's kind of on the more extreme end. Sometimes people can feel betrayed by, the toy company, or maybe they feel like they can't keep up, or maybe they feel like there's no end game in sight, and then, they just might quit altogether. Or, you never know, maybe life gets the best of you, maybe, there's something that you can't control that comes up that prevents you from pursuing the hobby any further. And you might be forced to either quit or just take time off. For example, you might hit like a major milestone in your life. Maybe you get married, or maybe you have kids, or maybe you're buying a house or a car. And, action figure collecting, rightfully so, it takes a back seat. There's more important things in life than collecting action figures. And, in instances like that, that makes sense. You want to take some time off just because you want to refocus and, adjust your budget because you have bigger and more important things in your life going on than, little 6-inch plastic toys. So that's something I think a lot of people can kind of relate to. Sometimes you quit because, you feel like the hobby is going in a different direction than what you want. Sometimes you might be frustrated, or there's just circumstances that are out of your control, and you just need the breathing room, and you're like, I just need time off, or I'm just done altogether. And that's something I can actually relate to. Some years ago, back in 2015 or 2016, I was really knee deep into collecting action figures. I'm if you look behind me, I'm always knee deep into collecting action figures. But there was this period of time where I was like super hardcore about stuff. I'd always be pre-ordering all like the hardcore third-party Transformer toys, making sure I was up to date with the Black Series figures. But then lo and behold, a girl entered the picture, and then I kind of told myself, I'm like, you know what? I don't think, me collecting all these toys is something that she's going to approve of or be into. And I kind of told myself, I'm going to set this hobby aside for now just to prove to myself that I don't need this. There's other things in my life that I want to pursue, like this girl. And I just wanted to prove to myself that I could step away from the hobby. And I did, for maybe about close to like 6 months. I kind of like stopped collecting. There were certain things I'd pick up every now and then, like, like 1 or 2 action figures like a month or something like that. But that wasn't out of the need to like, I need this. Is more so like I'd be at the store and say, oh, this is pretty neat. I'd like to have this. But, going from spending so much money to like, maybe $20 a month, it kind of like showed that I was able to like show restraint and tell myself I could move away from this hobby and pursue other things. Unfortunately, the things with this girl didn't really pan out. And then as soon as it fell through, I kind of just went on a crazy, spending, I don't know. I just went nuts one night online. I'm like, I'm just going to spend all this money and buy all the stuff I missed out on. And that kind of like filled a void in my life for a little bit. But yeah, I was able to take some time off, and I think that's, if you're in the hobby long enough, I think everyone's going to experience something along those lines, whether it's life dictating to you that you need to like stop, or by choice, whether it's through frustration or feeling that you want to just wrap it up. So 50% of the people responded with that. All right, so the next response was, no, keep those new figs coming. And this was the second popular vote. 25% of you said, no, keep those new figs coming. So the way I interpret this also is that I picture that being more so younger collectors than older collectors. Newer collectors and younger collectors, they approach the hobby with a lot more enthusiasm. And that's great, because I've been there before. When you're new to the hobby, you're very enthusiastic about it. You're going to all the websites. You're going out to all the user groups and message boards. You're always up to date with all the social media posts. You're excited about new product. Back in my day, it's always fun to like go to a store and then see a new line of action figures on the shelves. That was always exciting. The landscapes change differently, and nowadays, everything's unveiled through like social media and reveals and whatnot. And it's very easy to get enticed and sucked up into like the whole hype train and all the marketing that comes at you. And, everything looks nice, shiny, and polished, especially like through social media. Anytime any of these manufacturers unveil a new line of action figures, they always have the best photography. They always have the best angles and the best lighting. And it's easy to get excited. So if you're new to the hobby, or if you're a younger collector, I could see that being like, yes, I'm excited for this. Send me more, send me more. But if you're like me, and if you've been in the game long enough, sometimes you'll tell yourself, just how many Batman figures do I need? How many Luke Skywalkers? I kind of feel like I have every version of Optimus Prime and then some. So I kind of feel like this answer was more so from younger and newer collectors. But I mean, that's a great thing. I think if you're new to the hobby, or if you're young or young at heart, it's always great to be enthusiastic about new figures, because as like people like me step aside or bow out of the hobby, it's always nice that there's a younger generation to fill that gap and keep the momentum moving, so that this wonderful hobby continues onward and onward. Right, so the last answer I offered was no, I even started collecting new lines. Again, this kind of falls in line with the previous answer. Keep those new figs coming. I kind of also see this as possibly, if you're a younger or newer collector, kind of having that enthusiasm for new toys. So 18% of you, you don't get burned out. You want to see, new lines of toys, which is cool. I understand that also. Especially like, for example, if you're into collecting Transformer figures, it seems like, every maybe like 6 months, Hasbro offers like a different line of Transformers to collect, which is pretty exciting. And I don't know, there is excitement about new stuff. New stuff is always kind of cool. I remember back in the day with McFarlane in the 90s, they had like multiple lines of action figures. They had their dedicated Spawn line. They had lines dedicated to other comic book properties, like Wetworks and like Savage Dragon. McFarlane was dabbling in sports also. They're kind of giving us, if you're like a fan of like starting lineup, McFarlane was offering a much more sophisticated, mature collectible for sports fans, which was awesome. They branched out into movies and music. There was the Kiss action figures. I think there was a Jimi Hendrix, a Janis Joplin. They had their what was it called? Movie Maniacs line. So, I mean, for me, it's like, even though I was into Spawn, every time I'd pick up a toy magazine like Toy Fair or Tomart, and McFarlane unveil a new line of action figures, even though it had nothing to do with Spawn, the fact that they're producing a high-level quality in a different line got me excited. It'd be for like, oh man, they're coming out with these new anime figures. I gotta check that out. They're coming out with action figures for the new X-Files movie. So new lines, it's kind of cool. It keeps things fresh. And if you're a younger collector or a newer collector, I can see you being really excited about this adding to your collection and expanding beyond just like, the one or two lines that you're into. All right, so one person left a comment to reply to this. Have you ever gone through action figure collecting burnout? And that was Steven Romero. And 10 months ago, he said he goes through all of the above, bro, 100%. And if you're in the hobby long enough, I really do think you're going to experience all of these things. You're going to get tired of collecting the same thing. You're going to quit or take some time off. There's going to be moments where you're going to feel excited about the hobby and you want to see new figures and you want to see new lines and you're going to jump all over everything. So I do really think that, if you stick around in the hobby long enough, you're going to experience the entire gamut of all these different emotions. And it's stupid because it's all over little plastic, people. All right, so the next thing is my experiences with Burnout. So yeah, I've gone through Burnout. I kind of addressed it earlier. It's like, there's certain toy lines like Marvel Legends. I'm feeling kind of burnt out on that. I feel like Hasbro only goes so far with it. It doesn't help sometimes for me also is that their strategy is kind of like this also with Star Wars too, is that Marvel Legends, it's a very broad and blanket line of action figures. It doesn't always get laser focused on one thing. You could argue that with their waves. But the one thing I enjoyed about, for example, way back in the day, like in the 90s, Toy Biz, they would offer like a dozen different lines of Marvel superheroes. There'd be a dedicated X-Men line, there'd be a dedicated Avengers line, and a dedicated Fantastic Four, Spider-Man. And it seems like those lines were very laser focused. And also there'd be different themes and play features associated with each one. So for me back then, it was easy to get excited and not feel burned out because I didn't feel like I was handling the same thing over and over again. Sometimes Toy Biz would release a line of X-Men figures that might have been 6 inches large versus, another line that was 5 inches. Some might have really wacky play features, like maybe they doubled as water pistols, or maybe, they had crazy spring-loaded mechanisms that allowed them to shoot projectiles. It was across the board. They did everything, but I think that kind of a variety kind of kept my enthusiasm. And, nowadays it's kind of when I'm handling the same type of figure over and over again, it feels like I'm just on repeat. And I kind of feel like that with Marvel Legends. For me, if I feel like I've seen and done everything there is to do with those figures, and every time there's a new figure, I feel less excited because I think they've raised the bar so high that I've kind of experienced everything they can offer. It's in terms of their engineering, they've already hit a wall. I don't think they could go any further with it unless they killed the line altogether and just gave us an entirely new product. So for something like Marvel Legends, I kind of feel a little bit burned out with that. Likewise with the Star Wars Black Series, I kind of feel the same way. The McFarlane stuff, it feels like it's a constant work in progress, and I think that's what excites me about it. So when it comes to that, I don't feel burnt out with the product, but I do feel burnt out in terms of the way the figures are released and distributed. That's one of those cases where I feel like I'm being hit by a tidal wave. I think McFarlane's giving us too many options, too fast, and all at once. If you watched my previous vlog on checklists, I visit a couple of websites, and it's just insane about how many action figures within 1 year McFarlane released. And if they keep up that pace, I think people at some point in time are just going to be burned out on the product because there's just too much of it. And I think that's one of the things that kind of for me hurts the McFarlane stuff. There's no breathing room. There's no time for me to really appreciate what I have, especially if I feel like there's 2 new waves of action figures every week. It really honestly feels like that. You might argue otherwise, but every time I'm at Target or Walmart, I'm seeing a figure that's new on the shelves that wasn't there the week before, and it's insane. It's I don't know. I'm not sure if they're just taking advantage of the fact that people are excited and they know that they have a dedicated fan base that's just going to continue to feed the fuel and just kind of keep that momentum going. But I kind of feel like too fast, too soon, too much, it's going to really hurt them in the end. But that's just me and kind of my experiences like feeling burnout with those companies. All right, so next, dealing with burnout. All right, so this is it's gonna be different for everybody. I think everyone's gonna experience burnout on different levels. Some people might be a little bit more extreme than others, and we're going to talk about ways that you could deal with action figure collecting burnout. First, take a break. Like I keep on saying, no one's putting a gun to your head, forcing you to buy these action figures. Unless there's something very, very, very limited, don't worry if you don't buy it right then and there. Chances are you'll be able to find it later on. So, if you feel like you need to take a break from the hobby, by all means, go ahead and take a break. Taking a break could mean, not going to the store for a week, not going to any online shops for a week, not checking out the social medias. Taking a break could last anywhere from like a week to, if you want to take a year off, go ahead. I think that was one of the cool things when I did take a break during that one period of time when I was pursuing that girl, that when I was gone for 6 months, I was kind of out of the loop. And then when I kind of got back into the loop, it felt like everything was fresh and new again. So I think taking a break's healthy. For one, it helps you save money. I don't think anyone has like a bottomless wallet filled with like infinite amount of cash, unless you're like Scrooge McDuck or something. So taking a break's good. It's good for your wallet. It's good for your mental health. It's collecting action figures is not a necessity. You don't need it like air and water to survive. It's a luxury. It's something that, brings you a certain amount of happiness, but in the end, you really don't need it. We don't need any of these things. So feel free to take a break, and take a break for as long as you want. Don't feel obligated. And at the same time, if you feel like you're going to take a break, also be kind of smart and say, I'm just taking a break. There's some people that take a break and all of a sudden they feel the need to expel and get rid of everything. Don't do that, because you might regret that later. Just take a step back and just take a break. Your collection will be there. It'll survive without you adding to it. And believe me, there's nothing on the shelves that you won't be able to obtain later on. So if you need to take a break, just do it. And the next thing is find a related distraction. So if you're experiencing action figure collecting burnout, one thing you could do that could be very helpful is, take some time off and just find a related distraction. So when I say a related distraction, I'm kind of saying, take a lateral movement. Instead of buying action figures, maybe take some time out to get caught up on the comic books or the TV shows or the movies. It's stuff that will get you excited about that medium again. Like if you step away from collecting action figures, for example, let's say that you're really, really into Batman and you kind of feel like I'm done with Batman for now. Just take some time out and, maybe catch up on the old Batman Arkham games, maybe, read a couple of graphic novels, and that kind of stuff kind of reinvigorates you and gets you excited again for that character. And then when you do feel like the time is right to jump back into the hobby, you'll kind of have this new energy and outlook about things, and it'll be in a much more positive headspace. So, one thing that you could do is just, find a related distraction, whether it's comic books, video games, movies, TV shows, or, even just making custom figures, that's a related distraction. Revisit your collection. This is an important one. I kind of feel like that, if you've been collecting for a long time, you've probably amassed a lot of stuff. I mean, we all do. And even though we're always enticed by shiny new things, there's nothing wrong with the stuff that you already have. It's kind of like in King of the Hill when Hank Hill tells Dale, it's like, you don't need to buy any new guns, just play with the guns that you have. And I kind of feel that way also, is that you don't always need the newest, latest action figure. And I kind of think there's always that trend towards that. It feels like, especially if you watch, when I used to watch a lot of YouTube toy reviews, I always kind of felt like, I see this with across the board with different things, not just toy collecting. But anytime there's something new, it seems like that's one thing everyone jumps on and talks about, and it kind of builds up the hype, and then you start seeing new trends and then new fads, and people get excited about it. But then you have to ask yourself, are you really feeling genuine about this, or are you made to feel like you need these things in your life, or you need to keep up with the Joneses? So I think it's kind of nice every now and then to like take a break and just revisit your old collection, because what's old can be new again. If you haven't handled some of your toys in a while, there's a reason why you bought them in the first place. And over time, I think sometimes we neglect these things and that we forget why we bought them in the first place. And then when you take the time out to revisit them, you might fall in love all over again with certain toys. It's not always about the newest, shiniest, hottest thing on the market right now. Sometimes the stuff in your collection could be the most priceless things to you because you might have some sort of sentimental attachment to it. So I think revisiting your collection is very important. It's something you should do on a semi-regular basis. It helps keep you grounded, and it makes you appreciate, the things that you do have, and it kind of like caps you off on, the things that you want, and more so it helps you just kind of like, keep things balanced, so that's important. Just, revisit your collection every now and then, because there's a reason why you bought that stuff to begin with. And it's always nice to like, refamiliarize yourself with some of the gems in your collection. All right, so this is important also. Talk to friends and other collectors. So if you're experiencing action figure burnout, I think one of the most helpful things you could do is talk it out. Talk to other collectors, talk to your friends, see how they deal with this kind of stuff. It's almost like a support group. Like for me, my support groups, it's very, very small. Of all my friends in my circle, I'm the last one that collects action figures at this level. All my friends, got married, had kids, and like real life adulting responsibilities, versus me, where I'm kind of at the stage of arrested development. So there was a time when, I could like, my friends and I, we could relate to each other over action figures, but it's kind of changed. But I remember it being very helpful, like when they were kind of like in the same boat that you were in, and they understood the thrill of the hunt and going on these like wild goose chases for like, these hard to find action figures. They understood that. They'd understand like, the trials and tribulations of collecting, keeping stuff mint, selling stuff, feeling overwhelmed. So it's always nice to like talk to your action figure support group if you have one. That's, I think, very, very valuable. And the last resort, you could quit completely. If collecting action figures becomes too much for you, it's a very negative thing in your life. There's enough real world things that could bring us down, that could make us depressed, that could give us anxiety, that could give us stress. And if you get to the point where collecting toys, this is true for anything. If there's anything in your life that makes you feel in like in a bad or negative way, and if you feel trapped and cornered, it's all right to quit. You can step away from the hobby. And if you ever feel like there's a point where you want to come back to it, that's cool. But, number one, always take care of your mental health first. They're just toys. I've seen people go nuts on message boards over toys. They're just toys, People will argue over these kind of things, and it's like, it's terrible. People, as much as I love the hobby, there's also a very toxic side to action figure collecting. I think there's always some people that have a sense of entitlement. There's some people that take their opinions too far. There's some people that say too much and hurtful things towards other people, all because of plastic toys. These things are meant to enrich our lives and make us happy. And if you find yourself in a place where it's the complete opposite, it's all right to quit. It's all right to part with the collection. And if you ever feel like the need to come back, the toy industry and the toy hobby, it'll always be there for you to like come back to. But always take care of yourself first, and it's all right to quit. There's nothing wrong with, it's like smoking. Smoking's bad for you. It's okay to quit smoking. So if you get to the point where toy collecting is making you nuts, it's all right to step away. And if you need to step away permanently, that's all right also. All right, so another thing is, if you're dealing with burnout, you can refocus, re-strategize, and relax. I think this is really important. If you've been into the hobby for a very long time, maybe it's time to refocus. Maybe you need to kind of like define and give yourself boundaries about what you're allowed to buy or what you're allowed to collect. Re-strategize. Maybe you don't need every version of Superman and Batman. Maybe you just need to limit it to like two. So you don't feel the need to buy everything. And then most importantly, relax. The hobby is meant to be fun. These are toys. Toys are meant to be played with. They're supposed to bring joy into our lives. So just relax. If you find this hobby to be stressful for you, it's no longer a hobby. Hobbies should enrich your life. They should make you feel happy. They should provide an escape from like the harsh reality of the world. And if you find that this is bumming you out, or if it's creating a negative space in your life, just step back, refocus, re-strategize, and just try to figure out what's going to make you happy if you want to continue on with this crazy hobby. So any last words? Yes, have fun. There's a reason why I started collecting toys to begin with. Maybe it's out of nostalgia. Maybe there was something that you saw that kind of like brought you back to your childhood and you wanted to recapture that feeling again. Maybe it's the being around peers who are into the same hobby. There's so many different things that are positive about the hobby. So I think you should really try your best to emphasize and put weight on those things. Why do you do this? What makes it fun? Why do you find this enjoyable? So just have fun with it. If you find it's bringing you down or stressing you out or creating conflicts in your life or just other things, step away. It's just a hobby. And if you want to continue with it, just make sure you're having fun and that you're enjoying yourself and spending within your means. That's very important. All right, so I hope this was helpful. I didn't really have a full outline when I created this. I just knew I had to create a couple of slides just to keep this interesting, so you're just not like seeing my talking head just babble on and on. So I hope this was somewhat insightful for you. If you're new to the hobby, I hope that you're getting a lot out of it, and that you're enjoying it, and that you're excited about new toys, and hopefully you've met some cool people, made some new friends. If you've been in the hobby for a long time like myself, maybe I touched upon some subjects and experiences that you went through yourself, and maybe hopefully this made you feel a little less alone, knowing that there's other people out there that even though this is only toys, that they're experiencing the same things that you're going through. So yeah, if you found this helpful, cool. If you have any experiences you'd want to share or any tips or advice, feel free to comment below. I think other people would appreciate hearing, other collectors' stories and the ways they would deal with burnout and collecting and whatnot. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. Also, thanks to my good friend JC. He suggested that I do a vlog on collecting burnout. So JC, thanks for offering this topic. I think it's very important that people need to address this and evaluate how it applies to their collecting habit. All right, so I hope everyone's doing well. Take care, and I will talk to you later. All right, bye.